People who are on a gluten-free diet compared to people who are eating wheat have 4 times the amount of mercury in their blood than people who are eating wheat. In another study, people who are gluten-free had significantly less good bacteria in their gut and more bad bacteria in the gut than people who are eating wheat. In another study, found that people who are eating gluten-free had significantly less killer T cells, a measure for immunity, compared to people who are actually eating wheat. We have been eating wheat for millions of years. We didn't even start hunting and cooking our own meat until 500,000 years ago. We have 2 million years more genetics for wheat than meat. You can see where we're going. We already have science showing immunity is compromised, good bugs are compromised. You have more toxicity and mercury in the blood because of not eating these foods like wheat that are triggers for the immune response. An immune system doesn't engage unless it's forced to engage. It has to respond to something. Take away all the triggers for that response, you don't have an immune system.
The Vidal Speaks Podcast.
Episode 78, Dr. John Douillard, Gluten Sensitivity and the Lies Behind Eating Whole Grains. Welcome to Vidal Speaks. My name is Deborah Vidal, former 11-year LPGA golf pro turned classical homeopath, certified plant-based nutritionist, and wellness coach. Each week here on Vidal Speaks, we bring you knowledge, inspiration, or natural remedies to help you take charge of your health and feel your best. I believe health is freedom and knowledge is power, so tuning in each week will give you the power to take steps towards freeing yourself from the chains that hold you back from having the energy to do all you want in life. No matter where you are in your journey of wellness, Vidal Speaks can help. I promise. Hi, my friends. How's your day going so far? Are you happy it's Wednesday? I sure am, because today's going to be a big show. Why, you may ask? Well, because today we're going to speak about wheat and gluten, and that's a very controversial subject. This subject is kind of one of those subjects that many health podcasters want to stay away from because there's so much confusion out there, and there are many big-name doctors that say completely opposite facts from each other about gluten, so this is really a touchy one. But I think I found a person with lots of scientific research to help us understand a bit more about if we should be eating wheat or gluten, and I'm going to throw in there whole grains, or if we should avoid it. His name is Dr. John Douillard. He recently came out with his new book called Eat Wheat. I'm sure you're probably saying, what? I thought eating wheat is bad for us, and that modern wheat has been hybridized so our bodies can't tolerate it, and that it inflames our intestinal tract. Well, Dr. Douillard and I are going to discuss all of this today and next week too, because I was able to do a really long interview, so we're going to do it in 2 episodes. I hope you guys are excited about this. I was extremely excited to speak with Dr. John because you guys know how many questions I have all the time, and this subject is a big one. So there were many, and I wanted them answered, and he was so generous to give me enough time to answer my questions. One of the reasons I picked Dr. John to tell us about this subject is because his book cites over 600 scientific studies to prove what he's going to tell us today. He said that he too was so confused why whole wheat and whole grains used to be considered a very healthy food and now they're touted as being so bad for us. How could that be? What happened? Did our ability to digest it change? Or did the quality of the wheat change? Or did someone just make up some theory that seemed to get regurgitated over and over? You know that happens a lot more than you think. But what about all the other healthy grains that have been used for centuries for healing? Well, he wanted answers, so he decided to weed through all the research to find the truth. And if you're really interested in learning the answers in detail to those questions, then you really should read Dr. John's book. It's filled with facts about research on whole grains. All of you out there must be going crazy right now when you hear that his book is called Eat Wheat, because there's books out there such as Grain Brain and Wheat Belly that are bestsellers, and they're being touted by all these paleo doctors like Dr. Mercola. and along with many other health advocates. If one book claims they have proven that grains are bad for us, and now Dr. John's book says that there's so much proof that grains are not only healthy, but a must to eat, so how do we make any sense out of all this? How do we know who to believe? Well, that's the million-dollar question, but I think I can help you guys understand the right answer, and I think Dr. John's work will back up all I've been telling you on this subject since I started my podcast. For those of you that have been with me from the start, you know that I always tell you that if you have digestive issues, then you likely won't be able to tolerate grains or beans, and you should avoid them until you heal your gut issues. But that you need to heal them so you can eat these foods, because these grains and beans are truly health foods, and they're really necessary because they're so high in fiber, and they actually feed our good gut bugs, which in turn revs up our immune system. We need a variety of good gut bugs. When we eliminate grains, we're giving away a big part of health, in my opinion. So I do believe that there are many people who can't handle grains and beans, but these people need to heal their gut so they can eat them, because the problem is the gut dysbiosis, not the grains and the beans. So today you're going to hear Dr. John speak a lot about these gut issues and how many people are having them these days, but also about how gluten-free foods are not really helping people. I was so happy to hear him say that his research pointed to the same conclusion that I've come to in my life and my practice. I didn't just read one article to come to this conclusion. I want to tell you that for many years I was taking people off gluten, grains, and beans because their digestive issues were so bad. I used to do this genetic test in my practice to see if they had the gluten sensitivity gene and to see how much damage was done to their intestinal tract from eating gluten. So I was really big on taking gluten out of many people's diet, including my own. I was gluten-free for almost 7 years. You wonder why? I'm sure that I did it personally. Well, the answer's twofold. First of all, I did the gene test and I had the gene, so I just thought it would be better to avoid it than one day maybe that gene would get turned on and I might not know it, and by the time I'd get any symptoms, maybe it was too late. So I got a bit scared into thinking that it would be safer to avoid gluten. But secondly, I had migraines, and I was curious to see if taking gluten out would help them and if it could be an underlying cause. And oh, by the way, Lloyd also was having horrible gut issues at the time, so for sure he needed to come off of gluten just till we could heal his gut, and it just made sense for both of us to do it. But honestly, it never really changed anything for me. My migraines for sure were not helped, and I didn't feel any different, which tells me that my gene must have not been turned on. And with Lloyd actually avoiding gluten, grains, and beans for some time, it really didn't change things either. But it takes years to heal a gut, and it was not really obvious for him, let's say, when he took it out. But I knew that there was an underlying problem with his digestive system, and since those foods are hard to digest, I knew it would just be better to take it out. He still had the IBS after all the years of taking gluten out of his diet, running to the bathroom 10 times in the morning. It's so awful because these people feel trapped. They can't leave the house. And I think in some way it was really necessary to keep it out of his diet just to give us more time to try to heal his gut. Healing the gut can take a long time, so avoiding gluten for 7 years was actually really good for us, even though I feel like it didn't change things. You just never know. It might have changed the environment enough to give us a chance to really heal his gut. And I think because of going gluten-free for some time and really using all those years to heal his gut, he now can eat sourdough bread and whole grains and beans with no symptoms. And although his gut is his weak point, it's nice to see him only have one bowel movement a day and to be able to eat foods he could never digest before. But we did a lot of things to heal his gut, and it took a long time. But wow, what a difference. Coffee enemas were really a big part of his healing for sure. The problem is that so many go gluten-free, but then they fill up with gluten-free bread, snacks, cookies, cakes, donuts, crackers. But these kind of gluten-free foods, first of all, are just junk foods that are all processed and totally unhealthy. But also, they're filled with white ingredients like white flours, such as potato starch, tapioca starch, and then there are all the gums like xanthan gum and guar gum, which many say are not healthy. So most gluten-free foods are white and processed and not whole grain, which is unhealthy, people. But when I cook gluten-free, I really tried to use the whole grain flours like garbanzo bean flour or whole grain sprouted rice flour, teff flour. But sadly, with gluten-free cooking, you still need to add a starch, usually like tapioca starch, and you usually need to add a gum like xanthan gum to every recipe because that makes up for that lack of gluten, which acts like the glue. So in the end, I always felt like although it was gluten-free, it just didn't seem as healthy as my old way of cooking with natural whole grain flour. So after all these years of gluten-free and with Lloyd's Gut Healthy now, we decided to bring whole grain bread back into our diet. We had already brought whole grains back into our diet. So as far as the bread goes, though, we only eat sourdough bread because sourdough adds great healthy gut bugs to our intestinal tract. But also, during that fermentation process, the starter eats the gluten or the protein, and that makes the bread much more digestible. Anytime you can use sourdough, use it because eating foods with sourdough really can help your health. But the bottom line is, you guys, is that whole grains and beans are so healthy, and unless you can't eat them, you should. And if you can't, then you need to focus on healing your gut so that you can eat them. But let's hear Dr. John go over all of this, and he'll tell you so many things today to help you make sense out of this confusing subject. But he's also going to tell us why the books like Grain Brain and Wheat Belly are not accurate in what they're saying. Dr. John is also an Ayurvedic doctor, so he's going to give us so many golden gems in this interview. Be sure to listen to everything he says. I love Ayurvedic medicine. It makes so much sense to me. It's really like nature's medicine. That's why I love it. I have a cookbook called the Ayurvedic Vegan. I think that's the name. And I love to learn what foods help which dosha that you fall under. Food really is medicine, and Ayurvedic principles really are founded on this premise. So today's show is really full of lots of wisdom. Okay, now, let's go speak to Dr. John Douillard, but first, let me tell you a little bit about him. Dr. John Douillard, D.C., CAP, is a globally recognized leader in the fields of natural health, Ayurveda, and sports medicine. Dr. John is the former director of player development for the New Jersey Nets NBA team. He's the author of 6 books, a repeated guest on Dr. Oz Show, and featured in Women's World Magazine, Huffington Post, Yoga Journal, and dozens of other publications. He is the creator of LifeSpa.com, the leading Ayurvedic health and wellness resource on the web, and 2013 Holistic Wellness Center of the Year in Boulder, Colorado. LifeSpa.com is evolving the way Ayurveda is understood around the world, with over 700 articles and videos proving ancient wisdom with modern science. Started in 1996 by Dr. John Douillard as a natural health and Ayurvedic clinic, LifeSpa has grown to host a robust online store, #1 Ayurvedic newsletter, self-help site, guided at-home cleanses, as well as a booming clinic. LifeSpa is located at the base of the Rocky Mountains in sunny Boulder, Colorado. Yay, that's where I used to live. Hello, Boulder. All right, you guys, are you ready for this one? This is going to be a good one. Be ready to put your memory cap on because there's lots of great little golden gems in this one. Okay, here we go. Hi, Dr. John. I'm so happy to have you on my show today because I'm really curious to hear the science behind how eating wheat is actually healthy for you. So thanks so much for joining me today on the Vidal Speaks podcast.
My pleasure. Great to be here.
So I want to know how you even got started with this idea of writing a book on eating wheat, or were you just maybe a person that couldn't eat it and then you were able to, or was there's just something else that stimulated to get on this subject?
Well, I think I've always been interested in digestion. I started doing cleanses way back when I was 17, 18 years old. And just for health purposes, I was into all these longevity experts way back then. And when after doing all these cleanses, I didn't really digest as well. I was, and I started needing to do cleanses to digest. So I was what I call a cleansing casualty. And then when I got into practice, I started realizing that a lot of people had digestive issues. And back then you'd say, okay, we can't digest well, don't eat wheat and dairy. That was like the logical thing to tell people. And they felt better for a little while, for, 2-3 months. So they come back and their problems came back. And then you say, well, don't get off of, nuts and seeds and soy, and they would feel better. And then the problems would come back. And it didn't take very long being in practice. That was way back in 1984, to realize that taking people off of their foods wasn't really solving the problem, that there was something else going on here. And then, of course, so over the years, I sort of ended up specializing in digestion and helping people with digestion. And then the gluten-free industry just became this $16 billion a year industry, and they're giving us in replacement for whole wheat, highly refined, highly processed gluten-free foods, which are really the fundamental cause of what's broken down our digestion in the first place, all the processed foods. And the medical profession was like, yeah, just take wheat out of the diet. Wheat's a poison. It's got to be bad for you. People feel better when they stop eating it. So that's as deep as they go. They don't take it any deeper than that. I'm going like, that is a symptom for a much bigger problem. And it's all we do in America is take care of symptoms really, really well. And we don't look underneath to find out what's really going on. So I felt compelled to write Eat Wheat because hopefully we'll get into it. Taking wheat out of your diet and making you feel a little better in your digestive system is a great thing to do. And I support people doing that. But not taking care of the real underlying problem is dangerous. And we've done this before. And we're now today digging out of epidemics like blood sugar epidemics and depression and obesity and now a global breakdown of digestive strength, all because we 60 years ago started treating symptoms by taking cholesterol out of our diet and replacing that cholesterol with highly processed, preserved foods and the replacement for the cholesterol was the polyunsaturated fatty acids, the vegetable oils, which are bleached and deodorized and boiled to make sure they don't go bad. They stick them in a loaf of bread. Loaf of bread stays on the shelf for a month or two without getting squishy. Clearly, the microbes won't go near that on the counter on your shelf. And then when you eat that stuff, our microbes won't go near it either. And there begins the whole problem.
So it's really interesting. Well, I'm a homeopath with a 20-year clinical practice, and I'm right there with you. Every patient that comes in has a gut problem. It's getting worse and worse. I know when I grew up, there were some people that had gut issues or stomach issues or food issues, but nowadays it's like almost everybody or every patient, if you're a clinical practitioner that's seeing people that are sick, that's just part of the picture today. So, and as you know, homeopaths, they treat the whole person, and there's no such thing as symptom management because you'll never fix a chronic disease unless you treat the person and the whole picture. So I love what you're saying. That makes so much sense. And one of the things, though, I think that's caused so much problem and allowed this industry to grow so big, and it's not that I can say I was for or against it because I really didn't know. I just tried to help my patients, and I took a lot of them off of gluten and did some testing with them, and they did do better, like you said. So I'm really interested to hear what you have to say today because it's kind of a big stretch for me because I personally went gluten-free for 7 years. And I want to talk to you about reasons why people do that. But the first thing that comes to my mind is there's so many like big doctors out there, big name doctors that have these books like, for instance, Grain Brain. I've heard you talk about it, but it's a very popular book. They fill it with research and then they go, wow, grains and wheat and beans, they're terrible for you. Stay away from them. So what does the average person do when there's two books that say they claim that they're research-based and they're saying the opposite message? It's so confusing to people.
It really is confusing. And I think in a lot of ways, the research that's in there And who would know that? But the research is actually interestingly flawed. What Dr. David Perlmutter, who I did a big debate with, you can watch it on my website at lifespa.com and watch us go back and forth with the science. But what he did was he said, okay, wheat has a high glycemic index. It acts like sugar, and therefore sugar causes Alzheimer's. So therefore wheat, because it acts like sugar, must cause Alzheimer's. Dr. Davis, with the Wheat Belly book, wrote a book saying that wheat acts like sugar, gives people a big fat belly, call it a wheat belly. It really should have been called a sugar belly, but anyway, that was the science. Well, here's the real story that nobody hears, which is why, and one of the reasons why I wrote Eat Wheat, with over 600 scientific references, 3 times what they have in their books, that actually show that wheat is actually quite beneficial for you. And the whole wheat, the whole grain, when you eat the whole thing in its natural state, even in a loaf of bread, has a low glycemic index. It does not act like sugar, like they say, but refined, processed wheat, Wonder Bread, all this junk that they feed us, anything refined and processed is going to have a higher glycemic index. It's been pre-digested for us. So it's going to go into the blood, act like sugar, cause weight gain, and cause what David Perlmutter causes, risk of Alzheimer's. Wheat, whole wheat, in the MIND study, which is a diet that includes 3 servings of whole grains and whole wheat per day, reduced the risk of Alzheimer's by 54%. In the Mediterranean diet, reduced the risk of, which includes whole wheat, reduced the risk of Alzheimer's by 53%. A massively large Harvard study came out just in the last month and a half, and they had over 110,000 people in their study, followed them for over 25 years, and they found that the people who ate the least amount of gluten had the highest risk of diabetes.
Wow.
People with the highest amount of gluten in their diet had the lowest risk of diabetes. And then in another Harvard study came out in the same month, this was a 195,000 people, another 25 plus year study, and they found that the people who actually ate the least amount of gluten had the highest risk of heart disease. And in that study, they went further, and they said, what happens if you eat refined versus whole wheat? And they found when people ate whole wheat, they had even a massively more significant reduction in heart disease. So to take the science that says that wheat's like sugar and therefore sugar, there are no studies that say that wheat increases the risk of Alzheimer's. There are no studies to say that. There's none. But they said there are studies that show that refined wheat has a high glycemic index. And they extrapolated the rest of the story and wrote best-selling books about it. And if you go on the web, there's many medical doctors who really criticized Dr. David Perlmutter's research because he made that jump, that leap of faith, but it didn't turn out to be true. Now we have 2 major Harvard studies saying that this could be a problem. And here's what we now know, and this is something that's really interesting. People who are on a gluten-free diet, compared to people who are eating wheat, have 4 times the amount of mercury in their blood, which is a toxin, than people who are eating wheat. In another study, healthy people who are gluten-free, had significantly less good bacteria in their gut and more bad bacteria in the gut than people who are eating wheat. In another study, healthy people found that people who are eating gluten-free had significantly less killer T cells, a measure for immunity, compared to people who are actually eating wheat. And what all this suggests is that wheat has been in our diet as ancient and early humans. As far back as 3.5 million years ago, they found gluten residues in the teeth of ancient humans that long ago. And so we have been eating wheat for millions of years. We didn't even start hunting and cooking our own meat until 500,000 years ago. We have 2 million years more genetics for wheat than meat, which is interesting. Everybody who can't eat wheat goes to more meat, which is sort of interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea is we have the genetics for eating wheat, and the hard-to-digest anti-nutrients on the wheat, the lectins and the phytic acids, those are the harder-to-digest components that stimulate and trigger an immune response in our gut. And if we just sterilize our diet, and we did already sterilize our environment, killed all the bugs, our microbiome, our diversity of good bacteria in our gut is significantly less than it should be or once was.
Yeah.
And then we do what? Then we say, okay, now because your gut bugs are out of whack and you can't digest well, let's take all those foods out of the digestion. So what you can see where we're going. We already have science showing immunity is compromised, good bugs are compromised. You have more toxicity and mercury in the blood because of not eating these foods like wheat, that are triggers for the immune response. An immune system doesn't engage unless it's forced to engage. It has to respond to something. Take away all the triggers for that response, you don't have an immune system. This is a dangerous road to hoe.
Okay, you said so many things there I want to touch upon, because one of the things, I'm a whole food plant-based person, and one of the things, and so not paleo, but one of the things we have in common is we take out the processed junk foods and eat lots of veggies. And the one thing that we disagree on is this idea, the paleo movement, they take out the beans and all these grains. And I always just said they're just throwing out the baby with the bathwater, because they all talked about lectins. They're so dangerous and they're so poisonous. But they're such an important source of fiber. And when you're removing all these grains, including wheat, from your diet, but even if they were not eating gluten and they were just eating other grains, they still take them out. And I just feel like, man, those fiber are so necessary for you to get the bacteria, to feed your gut bacteria. And it never sounded right to me. So I'm really happy to hear you say that actually the studies are actually showing that too, that without that, we're kind of sterilizing ourselves even more, because we are not getting a big enough diversity of gut bacteria. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, you're right. And exactly, there are so many studies that show that the lectins and the phytic acids reduce colon cancer. They support optimal health. They have so many positive things. But then you can also find studies that show that lectins and phytic acids are actually harmful. Well, when you've broken down your digestive system, you can't digest much of anything. And that's what I'm sure, like you said, my practice and in your practice, I see patient after patient, which is brand new after 35, pushing 40 years of practice. What I have never seen situations where people come in, they can't digest not only wheat and dairy, they can't digest nuts or seeds or beans or legumes or grains of any kind. And then you do a study on that group of people, and I would imagine that they're going to have inflammatory reactions to things like lectins and phytic acids that have been in our diet forever. So once again, instead of fixing the problem, rebooting digestion, which is what Eat Wheat, my book, is all about, is how to reboot the digestive system so you can break bread again and reboot your immunity as a result of that. Those are really important concepts, but it just seems to be, I think, wheat has been found guilty without a fair trial. Everybody thinks it's bad. Gluten-free is better. And we're just being duped by the marketing dollars of a $16 billion a year industry.
Yeah. So, and don't you also think that the way that the body is, it needs all things, not just all foods that are so easy to digest or all foods that are so hard to digest? I mean, part of creating a healthy digestive system, or any healthy system, is about the balance. And some people say lectins are poisons, but sometimes poisons are the very thing that heals a body. In homeopathy, we have a book called, something about the bigger the poison, the more the healing, or something like that. But I just feel like the body needs that diversity to have its balance, don't you?
Well, we have been eating poisons since the first early humans stepped on this planet millions of years ago. And in fact, we have one taste bud. Here's the proof of that. We have one taste bud for the taste of sweet. Mother's milk was sweet. Anything that was sweet on the planet after that was not going to kill you. It was going to be safe, and it still is to this day. We have over 300 and counting taste buds for bitter taste, because bitter, like a dandelion, can cure you, but a bitter can kill you as well. So we have been navigating around bitter tastes for millions of years, and we've developed an immune system based around those. And when you just pull the plug on that immune stimulation, you're going to slowly but surely go down the road of more hypersensitivity issues and more immune compromised issues, and that's exactly where we're going. So I'm not saying we should eat poison, but tomatoes are poisonous, potatoes are poisonous, all the nightshades are poisonous, all the goitrogens are poisonous, the broccoli is a poison. These are all poisons that we either have hybridized or we figured out a way and adapted to be able to eat. Wheat is the least amount of those poisons. And the study showed the University of Utah found that people can gather, and ancient humans 3.5 million years ago could gather enough wheat berries from the grasslands of Africa in just 2 hours to feed them for an entire day. And that was way before they figured out how to hunt their own meat. So there's a really good chance sitting in some big tall grass in the middle of Africa savanna would have been a lot easier and safer to just pick out some wheat berries and chew on them, or grind them up and make a porridge out of them, than it was to try to hunt down an elephant or a lion or something. We just didn't have that skill.
Yeah, and it just seems that something that's been around that long and eaten so long and healed people, or been part, let's just say a big part of a healing diet, how can we really suddenly say that it's so dangerous to eat? So that's why I love what you do, because you're saying the bigger issue is the bad digestion and the problem with the gut. And there's lots of reasons for that. Anyone who's a practitioner or just been in the health industry knows that we have lots of reasons for gut issues. But one of my really big ones that I'm passionate about, because I'm a professional golfer playing the LPGA Tour for 11 years. So I was around a lot of Roundup and pesticides on the golf courses.
Mm-hmm, yeah,
and so now you can see today with all the spraying that we do on these non-organic crops, they're just spraying them to death. And I was just did a big interview with Dr. Michael Antonio from London, who did this big study on GMO and corn and Roundup, and showing just how bad it is and how damaging it is to the gut. So imagine all these people who don't eat organic or can't afford to eat organic, they're just getting loaded with pesticides and Roundup in particular. But oh my gosh, don't you think this has to be a major part of why so many have gut issues?
Absolutely. And I touched upon this in my book, Eat Wheat, and we found studies that show that there are microbes in your mouth, esophagus, stomach, and small and large intestine that make enzymes. These little bugs make enzymes that are specifically engineered to digest the gliadins of wheat, the hard to digest components of the wheat. And very, 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 very specifically there. And pesticides kill them, which renders us unable to use those enzymes to digest hard to digest food. So it sort of makes sense that we, of course, just don't eat that food. But at the same time, what about demanding whole foods? What about demanding pesticide-free foods? What about rebuilding the microbiome and getting the body to digest well? Because once again, our ability to digest well is directly linked to our ability to detoxify well. If you can't digest wheat, and you once were able, then how are you going to digest or detoxify the mercury that's on every organic vegetable? It comes from the coal mine plumes, clouds, from the electrical plants that cover every organic vegetable. You can't. So taking wheat out of your diet today, I agree, take it out if it doesn't feel good digesting it. But now let's fix the real problem, because, not taking care of that problem, thinking everything's wonderful, is a terrible insurance policy, because you're going to find out in 10, 15, 20 years that you've been accumulating toxicity from mercury in the environment. 4 billion pounds of toxic chemicals dumped in the American environment every single year. We need a good digestive system / detoxification system to protect ourselves. And if we don't have it, we will be in harm's way in the near future. And we don't think long term. We're so short-sighted. Get rid of the symptom, take care of the problem, you're good to go, out the door.
Yep. And I'm big on, in this show, I've done 2 or 3 shows on mercury alone, just the coal industry that's spewing mercury in our air and how it's affecting all of us. But I'd like to hear a little bit more about how you can explain the digestion link to the detoxification that the body does.
Perfectly. Yes, I would love to. Here's the thing. You're so right about the pesticides, and golf courses, I guess, must be, horrendous for people to just be on that for day in and day out for as many years as you were. That's one piece of the puzzle. The other piece of the puzzle has slowly, insidiously broken down our digestive system, which is when they took cholesterol out of our diet because they thought it caused heart disease, which now we know it had nothing to do with heart disease. They replaced it with the cooked vegetable oils, the polyunsaturated saturated fats, the margarines they told us were so good for us. Well, now we know that they lower cholesterol, which is what they got so excited about, but they increase the risk of heart disease. And now we know not only that, but those cooked vegetable oils, which will never go bad because they bleach and boil and deodorize them, so nothing in them can go bad. You put them in a loaf of bread or a packaged food or a brownie or anything, and that stuff is indigestible. And it goes right to your liver and your gallbladder, and it congests it. And the number one abdominal surgery today in America is gallbladder surgery.
Yep.
And the gallbladder is storing the bile that is like a Pac-Man, gobbling up toxins in your liver, in your blood, And then when it gets into your intestinal tract, when you eat some fatty food, it gobbles up and cleans the little villi of your intestinal tract, scrubs, clean, bad bacteria, parasites, mercury, gobbles it all up. And then it takes it back to the liver so it can be processed and taken out of the body. If that gallbladder congestion is there, which it is for most everyone, there's a medical term now, a new medical term called bile sludge. And when you have bile sludge, you're not going to produce the bile that you need to detoxify yourself. But the bile, if you can stay with me for a second, the bile, not only is it a Pac-Man gobbling up toxins, mercury, stuff like that, but the bile is a buffer, a neutralizer for the stomach acid. And the stomach acid, when you eat a ham sandwich, the stomach goes, oh my God, I have a ham sandwich here. I got gluten, I got ham. I'm going to need X amount of bile from the gallbladder to buffer and neutralize all this acid and to emulsify all the fat in the ham, from the ham sandwich. And the stomach sends a message to the gallbladder and no response. So the stomach says, okay, wait, I'm going to hold on to all the ham sandwich here for a while until those guys get their act together because I can't let the acid leave my stomach without having a buffer down there. I'll burn a hole through something and kill them. So I can't do that. So the stomach holds on to the acid. And this is the beginning of heartburn. It's the beginning of indigestion. And eventually, over time, your stomach says, you know what? He ain't making the bile like he made in the old days. And you know what? I can't keep making this acid. I'm going to cause an ulcer. So I'm going to stop producing the acid. So the stomach reflexively turns down the production of the stomach acid. And there you go with the wheat. Your wheat is a hard to digest protein, so is dairy, so are nuts, so are seeds. Without that strong stomach acid, those proteins go undigested into your small intestine. They're now too big to get into the blood because they're undigested. So where do they go? They go directly and get uptaken into the collecting ducts of your lymphatic system, whose job is to carry your immune system, whose job is also to deliver good fats, triglyceride fats, to every cell of your body and give you energy, whose job is to drain toxins from your joints, your muscles, your skin, and your brain to the tune of 3 pounds of toxic chemicals out of your brain lymphatics every single year while you sleep at night. So when the lymphs around your belly get congested, you get belly fat. The lymph congests in your brain, you get brain fog. The lymph congests in your skin, you get skin rashes. All of these brain grain wheat-related allergens are due to congestion of the lymphatic system, which is due to broken down digestion, and all of it's fixable with whole foods.
Time to take a break or grab a drink of your favorite healthy drink. What are your favorite drinks? I like just plain lemon water, but if you have to pick something other than water, I like lemonade with a splash of rose water or lavender. Yum. And our lemon tree just had so many lemons, we had to do something with them, so I have bowls of them. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make lemonade and put a splash of rose water in it. I love that drink. But I also love kombuchas. I'm drinking one that's called ginger peach right now. My other favorite drink is the Kavita Lime Ginger Tonic. And it's so nice to know that all these are healthy for us too, right? Anyway, my call to action today is to ask you guys to give me a hand in helping me reach my goal of helping millions of people get well by using clean food, plant-based organic whole foods, homeopathy, and detox methods that we speak about every week here on the Vidal Speaks podcast. So I'm asking you to spread the word of the show as much as you can, to leave a review if you have not. You know, it's so incredibly hard to get people to take time out of their day to leave a review. I know it is, but still, I just want to say, please do it for me if you would. It's just something that iTunes uses for ranking, and unless you guys do that, then the show doesn't get ranked high enough for anybody to find it. And I work so hard to get this message out there, and I just want it to become a movement. And lastly, you guys, please just keep using that Amazon banner on my website for all your Amazon shopping needs. It's a simple way for you to help support the show. All right, you guys, now let's get back to the show. That's great. I love to hear that because that's where I'm at. You know, of course, sometimes we have to take some supplements, but whole foods, healing people with whole foods, that is just truly healing. And I'm curious what you think about coffee enemas. I know you have a spa there in Boulder called LifeSpa, and I've been a proponent of coffee enemas for that reason because it helps clean the bile and help clean the liver, and the Gerson Clinic uses it. You know, they do 5 a day, but that's because of the state of the patient being so terminally ill with cancer and other really serious diseases. But I think that's a big help for the liver and the gallbladder. And like you said, the lymphatic system needs help too. All our detoxification methods need help, but I'm curious if you've ever used coffee enemas.
Well, I mean, I completely agree with you in terms of when you put something in your large intestine, it's like a main line to your liver and your gallbladder. So you're going to increase the liver flushing. But here's the problem that I have found clinically with coffee enemas. Bile makes you poop. No bile, you get constipated. No bile, no bowel movements, no bile, no detoxification. So when your liver is congested, you clean it out with a coffee enema. It's one of the strategies to do that. But if you continue to do that and you don't address the underlying cause of your constipation, repair, heal, support the integrity of your intestinal mucosa, you end up not getting the good bugs back. It becomes very, very difficult, and people just find themselves doing coffee enemas. Now, when you're sick, it's a powerful, effective medicine, but I always think of medicine as something you get on, get better, get off. So if you use a coffee enema to get on, get better, get off, they're fine. But oftentimes people just find that they work so well, they get the bowel movements going, and they feel so cleared out, they end up needing to do 2 or 3 a week.
Well, what's interesting, I've used them like even with patients with diarrhea. It's never been a symptom to use them because it's not really an enema treatment for your bowel. It's really more of a liver treatment. And so even my patients that had IBS and really a lot of diarrhea going 5, 7, 8, 9, 10 times in the morning, and it really helped heal their gut. And yeah, for some people, you know, you get them to a healing point, they can stop, but we're so constantly exposed, especially to these environmental toxins, that I just feel like it's something that can help keep the liver clean. And I was just wondering your experience because I've had some pretty good success helping people's gut heal with them. But I know it's just not probably something of your practice, and I appreciate your opinion on that. I'd like to know more about the lymphatic system, like what's the best way to detoxify our lymphatic system?
Well, I think, and I think you're absolutely right. When you talk about your benefits with a coffee enema, what you're really saying is that the underlying congestion that is underlying many of people's digestive concerns is congestion in the liver or the gallbladder. And I am not against a coffee enema if it's done properly as you're doing it. But fundamentally, that's the issue that we have to all address. And when the bile's not healthy, then the lymph will not be healthy. So can I first give you some other strategies for the liver, and then give you some some lymph strategies?
Yeah, that'd be great.
They sort of cross over.
Sure.
So there are things in medicine called cholagogues. Cholagogues mean agents that increase bile flow, decongest your liver and your gallbladder. And I actually just finished writing and published a free ebook called Safe Liver Cleansing, which is really great for people who want to dig in and really clean out their liver. So cholagogues, apple, celery, beets, a juice of that first thing in the morning with breakfast, a great way to get cholagogue activity, get that bile to really kick in. Artichokes, phenomenal for decongesting your liver and your gallbladder and supporting the production of bile. Fenugreek tea increases the contractibility of your gallbladder by 75% in one study. Turmeric, another cholagogue, does it by 50%. Ginger, another cholagogue. So all of these amazing things are just things that were typically in people's diets. If you amp them up a little bit, you get some wonderful bile cleansing ability. Beets may be my all-time favorite because they work so incredibly well.
Can the beets be cooked, or are you talking the juice of beets?
Sure, no, they can be cooked and then taken that way. They can be juiced. They can be grated into like a
salad.
Beet salad.
Yep. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. It's fantastic. And then for the lymphatic system, you have things to decongest you, and anything that would make your skin red that was used, historically as a dye, like a raspberry or a blueberry or a blackberry or a pomegranate or a beet for that matter. Any of those things that dye your skin have a lot of natural antioxidants. And the science that I found showed that the antioxidants actually work through your lymphatic system to cleanse and to scrub it. But if the foods aren't being broken down, digested properly upstream, that those undigested foods, proteins, and toxins will overwhelm the lymphatic system and cause the fatigue and the tiredness and the lethargy and the food allergies. So all of those things, pomegranates, beets, cranberries, all your leafy greens are also, anything alkaline in nature will increase lymphatic flow. Hydration, so important. We drink enough water to stay hydrated. Exercise, all of these things, really, really important for lymphatic flow. And then once you get your lymph moving and your drains are moving and your bile is kicking in, your liver's making bile again, you have the buffers to make the acid. So you have one final step, which is to turn the stomach fire back on. And what I like to do, I do it with herbs as opposed to taking like a hydrochloric acid pill or a digestive enzyme pill. And the spices that I use are 5. There's one called ginger, cumin, coriander, fennel, and cardamom. It's ginger, cumin, coriander, fennel, and cardamom. And that combination of the 5 spices is something that will reboot the production of your own stomach acid, increase the production of your own bile, increase the production of your own pancreatic and duodenal enzymes. In other words, it helps you be the digester versus taking a digestive enzyme pill that does the digesting for you. So again, we're right back to resetting function versus creating dependencies.
Yeah, and do you do all those spices together or just add them to foods at different times or different meals?
Well, they individually, they're amazing. The research on them individually is amazing. But when you put them all together, there's just like synergistic effect that they've been using this formulation for thousands of years. We have a product at LifeSpa.com called Gentle Digest, which all those together. You can spice your food, cook with your food, sprinkle it on your food, or take a capsule. Either way, but those are powerful digestive reset herbs.
Now, I know you're like the Ayurvedic master and you studied that, and I love Ayurvedic medicine. My homeopathic teacher, whose name is actually Dr. Master, he lives in Bombay, and he always gives us lots of Ayurvedic Indian philosophies and little home remedies. So I really love their remedies. They do help people a lot. And I was wondering if these 5 spices are Ayurvedic.
Completely. In fact, they're a classic Ayurvedic formula, which is kind of nice. And that's what I write about at LifeSpa.com, is taking ancient wisdom and proving it with modern science. So take something like these spices have been used for thousands of years. Then I go in and go, okay, that's a formula everybody loves. They've been eating it for digestive support. Then I go into the research. I find, wow, all of those spices, ginger, cumin, coriander, fennel, cardamom, they're all amazing for digestion. But then I find science that shows that when you put them all together, like they did for thousands of years, it has this amazing effect to reboot your own digestion so you can get off the pill or the powder, which I love, creating self-sufficiency versus creating dependency.
Wow, that's great. And I want to have you back on the show where we can just do a show on this ancient wisdom and your Ayurvedic knowledge, because today's so much to talk about wheat, but I really, if you're willing to come back, I'd love to talk to you more about that.
I'd love to.
Okay, so let's talk. I want to touch there on the last thing about those 5 spices. Can you just buy the organic spices that are powdery at the store and put them together with hot water and stir it up and drink it as a tea? Would that work?
It sure would.
Okay, perfect. That's good. We need something easy so people will actually take action,
absolutely.
Right?
And you can use them and cook with them, and you put them in a tea, or sprinkle it on your food, all kinds of ways you can use it.
Okay, so just a little bit back to mercury. I think many people, especially kind of lay people not in the health industry, I don't think they're aware how mercury can affect our stomach and our gut. I don't think they make the connection of their digestive problems could actually be coming from mercury overload. Can you explain how mercury affects and where it settles in our body and affects us?
Many people may have heard that there's people having mercury deposits building up in their brain tissue. So mercury is a fat-soluble chemical, and the brain is 60% fat. So when you take mercury on the organic vegetables, which are filtering down from the coal mine clouds that filter on everything, and you eat that mercury, and you don't have a really good stomach acid to initially break it down, and you don't have the initial bile flow, the good, robust bile flow, which is the Pac-Man to break and emulsify that chemical, then that chemical doesn't get broken down. And like I said, just like the gluten, if it doesn't get broken down in the upper digestion and it goes into your small intestine, It's too big to get into your blood. So it doesn't. It goes into the garbage can, which happens to be a really important thing. Your lymphatic system is your garbage can. So it clogs up your lymphatic collecting ducts. But the lymphatic collecting ducts are also trying to deliver energy through good fats to every cell of your body. So if the road is blocked with all these bad undigested proteins and fats, like mercury, for example, then the body will just store all the good fats in the belly fat around your belly. You get a big belly fat, but the energy never gets delivered, so you get super tired. And then your immune system is in there too, trying to get to the accident and put out the fire on Main Street, but the road is blocked, so the fire trucks can't get there. So you create a localized hypersensitive reaction, which is considered to be an allergic reaction. And then over time, the whole lymphatic system gets congested, and the brain lymphs can't drain the way they should to the 3 pounds of chemicals per year. And they now have found that those brain lymph congestions are linked to all the things that the brain talks about: mental fog, cognitive decline, anxiety, depression, brain fog, inflammation, infection, and autoimmune conditions are linked to congestion of the lymphs in your brain, which are directly linked to the congestion of the lymphs around your gut, which are directly linked to the indigestion or the inability to break down those hard to digest proteins and fats upstream in your stomach and gallbladder. And of course, your pancreas is involved there too. And when that all breaks down, we're going to have problems eating wheat. And it makes sense people stop eating it. But what they're giving us in replacement is processed gluten-free foods, which are the same things that got us in this mess in the first place. It's sort of funny, really funny, scary really, but it's just amazing that that's what they're touting as the solution, which is just making the cause worse.
Yeah, and so the way I see that you're describing it, you're saying all the very well-known symptoms of gluten intolerance, which would be brain fog and skin rashes and stomach aches and bloating and there's a whole pages of them, right? So all those symptoms can be symptoms not of gluten intolerance, but what you call brain drain, meaning that the lymphatic system in the brain can't drain, and so the toxins build up in the brain. Is that correct?
Exactly. That's exactly what's happening. It's not a grain brain effect. It's a brain drain effect, and that's what's causing our problem. And it's our lymphatic system is the drainage system of the body, the immune carrier system of the body, and a delivery of energy in the body. You take those three things away, and we are not going to feel good.
So what about these lymphatic machines, these kind of squeeze machines, or what about lymphatic massages or infrared saunas? What do you think about these three things?
All of them I'm a fan of. Anything that you can do to increase lymphatic flow. Unfortunately, a lot of them really just work on the superficial lymphs. There's what's called the skin-associated lymphatic tissue, which lines underneath our skin. So if you get bit by a mosquito, there's a little army of immune guys waiting to fight it so you don't get infected. But the vast majority of the lymph lines your intestinal tract. So it's a little bit more difficult to get to. You got to scrub your intestinal skin, repair, heal, lay down good permanent microbes. You have to repair the environment of the gut, scrub it, clean it, and refertilize it so the good bugs can grow again. There's lymphs around your respiratory tract, lymphs in your brain, and there's many, many techniques to get the deeper lymphs that are deeper than just a massage would get to.
And those squeeze machines, do they get any deeper? They squeeze, I've done it, and they squeeze pretty strongly. Does that move more around than a massage?
Well, I would imagine so. I mean, I haven't seen the science on those to see how much better they are than a massage, but I definitely think that anytime you get a massage of any kind, you're going to move blood and lymph. Anytime you do a superficial lymphatic massage, you're going to get the skin-associated lymph. Anytime you exercise and force your muscles to contract, you're going to get lymphatic flow. So, the average ancient human would run between 9 to, 12 kilometers a day. Most Americans sit in front of a computer all day long these days and don't get outside and don't get that movement. So we desperately have a lack of movement, which is directly linked to one circulatory system compromise, and that's your lymphatic system. But we don't talk much about lymph in our culture because nobody really knows that much about it. Western medicine sort of focused on blood and lymph being the cause of cancers and things, but there's a lot more there. But what's interesting, when I did the research for Eat Wheat, there's over 600 studies in my book. So many of them are about the lymphatic system. Volumes of research on the lymph. none of it may ever reach medical practice, which is the most amazing thing. I don't know if because if you clean the lymph, the body is not dependent on a new pill or a powder. I don't know the reason for that, but I found it really important to bring that research in. I write about it in my weekly articles as well on my website. But I felt really important to bring that ancient wisdom because in ancient Ayurvedic medicine, they talked about lymphatic system thousands of years ago. They only just discovered these brain lymphs 4 years ago. Up until that point, any medical researcher, doctor would tell you there was no lymphatics in the brain. And then
Wow.
3-4 years ago, they find them in the brain and they drain 3 pounds of chemicals out of our brain every single year while we sleep at night. And they're maybe the most important discovery in the last 50 to 100 years in terms of any anatomical thing in the body.
That's so interesting. I love learning the brain is something we're learning so much more about in modern times. It's very cool. But I'm wondering when you say that it drains 3 pounds of, is this like during the sleep cycle, like the liver produces so much, cleaning energy at 3 a.m.? Is that like the brain too while you're sleeping? Most of the detoxification from the brain lymphs, that's when it's happening?
It's very, very true. So here's what happens. The brain lymphatics, which I say brain, I'm talking brain and your whole central nervous system in your spine, they're draining while you sleep at night. And they're microscopic. That's why I didn't notice them until 3 years ago. They're really tiny. But 3 pounds is a lot of accumulative brain waste drainage, right?
Yeah.
But the big lymphs, like your muscles and your legs and your arms, when you move, they're moving all the time. And we've known that when you exercise and you move, those big lymphs are draining. So if you're not draining, and they move during the day while you're moving, and while you sleep, they stop moving, and the microscopic ones drain. But if you didn't move enough during the day and didn't get those guys adequately drained and detoxified, then those toxins from the big lymphs will overwhelm the little microscopic lymphs while you sleep, and you won't drain your brain while you sleep. And that will potentially lead to cognitive decline, anxiety, depression, inflammation, infection, and even the epidemic or the enigma of our time, autoimmune conditions.
Wow, that really shows how exercise is really important to keep our lymphatic system healthy. I think most people think of it as just keeping the heart and lungs healthy when you exercise. But thanks to what you taught us today, now we know exercise is really important to help detox that lymphatic system. So thanks for sharing that info. Well, I think this is a good place to end today's interview. So I really look forward to having you back on next week so we can keep talking about wheat and all the wisdom that you have to teach us. So thanks for joining me today, Dr. John, and I look forward to talking to you next week, okay?
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, did you guys learn something today? I hope you understand more now that there's no way to say gluten, whole grains, and beans are okay for everyone to eat. But I do hope that you understand that eating whole grains and beans are very important to health, and that if you can't tolerate them now, then that just means that you have to work on your digestive system. And once you do, you should be able to eat them. But one thing is clear from Dr. John's research, and that's that whole grains and beans are healthy foods, and our body uses that fiber from them to help our microbiome because they help feed the good bugs. We need a diversity of foods to do that so we can have many different kinds of good bugs in our gut and not just a limited few. The healthiest form of eating whole grains is to eat the whole intact grains. What does that mean? Well, it means to eat the whole grain that's not processed at all. So eating whole wheat berries or the whole grain of barley or oats or quinoa, brown rice, millet, rye, all as grains and not flours. Once they're milled into flour, they're not quite as healthy. However, there is still a benefit from them if when they're milled into a flour, they're still using all of the grain. So that means if you're using white processed milled flour, then they've removed a bunch of healthy parts of the wheat. So then it's really not healthy. But if you're using whole sprouted, let's say spelt flour, and they just grind it up, then you're still getting all the nutrients, although it's still not as healthy as the intact grain. So in the end, you can see why processed foods are so damaging, because not only are you not having any intact whole grains, but they're removing a lot of the healthy part of the grain. So let me give you an example. Let's say you wanted to make pancakes. When I make pancakes, I use oat flour. I just take my oats and I grind them up. And I don't grind them really fine. And as a matter of fact, I just add some whole like oat flakes to it too, so that I can get some coarseness in them. So they're kind of like ground into a chunky flour. And then I add banana for my egg, and I use hemp milk for my milk. I can add a little vanilla, and I like to add some sourdough starter if I have it. That's really great. Often I don't, because having a starter is a little bit like having a pet, because it's really something you need to care for and feed every day, but it's so super healthy. So I want to get into having some in my fridge all the time. Just adding sourdough to your baking recipes will help them have great flavor, and it just adds a really nice health benefit to your foods. Anyway, I also loved how Dr. John reminded us to look underneath the symptom and not just to take care of the symptom. And as a homeopath, that is how we're trained to look at any issue a person is having. It's about treating the whole person always. But modern medicine is all about treating symptoms only, which is outright not working and very dangerous. Dr. John says that if you have symptoms after eating wheat or grains, don't blame the wheat, blame your digestion and fix it so that you can eventually eat these healthy foods. I could not agree more. I also love that I got a very direct answer from Dr. John when I asked him, how are we to know who's right when books like Grain Brain and Wheat Belly are being touted as the science behind the danger of eating grains and wheat? And he just flat out said that their research and science is flawed. That's so cool he stood up and told the truth and he didn't dance around the question, don't you think? And he also said that he had an hour debate with one of the authors, so he even faced him and stood his ground, showing the real science. That's why it can be so confusing, though. In today's world, anyone can write a book, and once you get a big-name doctor to pass it around, then it just gets recirculated over and over, even if the message is wrong. Dr. Mercola is one of the doctors touting to avoid grains, and I saw an interview with him and Dr. John, and it was really interesting to see someone who was trying to hear something opposite of what they've been telling everyone. Dr. John has so much science, it's really hard for anyone to win that debate. So although modern times allows us access to any information, it's also made it much more difficult to know what is really science-based and what is not. I hope that's why you guys come here to this show. I work really hard to tell you the facts as I learned them, and I find the experts who have the science to back up their words. I'm always open to knowing what I may believe today could change in the years ahead if the science changes, but we have to make a call based on many things. One thing for sure is clinical evidence. Then there's scientific experiments to show the facts. And lastly, it's about trying it yourself. And all of these help you come to a conclusion. I think, though, we have to throw in also good old common sense. We should ask ourselves, does it really make sense that grains are poisoning us? No, that makes no sense to me. Does it to you guys? They've been eating these whole grains for centuries, and so many cultures have healed cancers with grains. Look at the macrobiotic healing diet. They eat grains, and they've healed so many people of cancers for hundreds of years. The Ayurvedic diet uses them. The Mediterranean diet includes them. So come on, do you really suddenly think they're unhealthy? No, but many people have gut issues today, and honestly, they might not be healthy for them right now, but they're missing out because they can't eat them. It's not the fault of the grain. Another one of my favorite things today, it's kind of like those little golden nuggets that I was telling you about, was when Dr. John was telling us about the foods that are cholagogues that help our liver and bile. And he said they are beets, apples, and celery. And then when he told us about the 5 spices to help reset our digestive system, oh, I love that stuff. That's such great information and easy. and it teaches you how food is medicine. You see, it's really natural to use food to heal ourselves, you guys. I always think we all need to eat clean foods, have great plants for healing and homeopathy, and then we have all the medicine we need in life. I'm such a big believer in this. Dr. John taught us so much about the lymphatic system today and how it's our garbage can of our body. That's a great way to put it. And then it shows you how important it is to keep this garbage can detoxed. With mercury in our air and our food now and all the pesticides and chemicals that we're exposed to, we really need to pay attention to our lymphatic system. The brain drain, as he called it. That info was so fantastic. I saw a TED Talk on this, and the guy was talking about how they just discovered how the brain has a lymph system. And I think I must have watched that 2-3 years ago, but I was so intrigued by it. I think that's so cool that they discovered this. But now imagine all the problems that can happen if your lymph system is clogged. Yikes, that's really scary. What an important system to pay attention to. And who ever talks about the lymphatic system? Not many. I actually bought a lymphatic detox squeeze machine. It feels really awesome. I went to the spa one time and they had it. And it wasn't that expensive, but I just splurged and I wanted to get it. And it squeezes your limbs, your arms and your legs, and it moves the toxins out of your lymphatic system. It just feels really good. It feels like 100 people are massaging you at the same time. But anyway, this is just a good reminder to go get it out and get on it or in it, because it's like things you put over your arms and legs, and start using it every day. But man, life just gets so full. It's a full-time job to take care of ourselves, isn't it? Gosh, what do we need to do every day? Let's see. Brush, floss, oil pulling, my espresso, squeeze machine, sauna, exercise, sleep. And then we still need time left for your passion. And oh yeah, there's work. Oh my gosh, but it is so true though. We really do have to commit to do things for ourselves to help us detox, because you guys, I say it all the time, if you're not taking any action to detox in the world that we live in today, you're going to be sorry and it's going to be too late. And today we learned about the need to detox that lymphatic system of ours and why it's so important. So thanks, Dr. John, for that great info. Well, you guys, I think that's enough for today. I think you know what time it is. It's time to say goodbye, my Vidal speakers. I hope you enjoyed the show today and learned a lot of new info that you can immediately implement into your daily life. Remember, with every little step you add, you just become a better, healthier version of you. Be sure to come back for part 2 with Dr. John next week. Ta-ta for now, or at least until next week. Till then, be sure to eat well and do some detox. Vidal has spoken. Remember, you heal with a plant-powered diet, including grains, homeopathy, and detoxing, of course. Peace, be healthy, be free, live life.